I thought I would do a quick video on the EFI system and just kind of the overview. As you can hear, I have it running 81 to 83 Imperial. It's coming along. We did a first drive yesterday. I drove it actually all day long, and it drives fantastic. Good pick up and go. I want to go over kind of the EFI system and what I've done with it. This is actually my second one with this system. And the system, of course, was not very reliable. A lot of that has to do with the cheap early parts and components, as well as the lack of knowledge at that time. Everyone was used to working with carburetors and timing ignition points, I should say, and things like that, and condensers. And they really weren't used to working with fuel injection in this era. And of course, as you know, this Imperial I rescued. We'll be getting it detailed later this week. So you have to excuse the mess. We'll do another video after it's detailed. But the EFI system was a pretty good idea. Chrysler decided to do it in-house, and versus doing it, getting like the Bosch system, which is like on my Seville over there, or something like that. Seville, of course, predated this car by a few years. And so Chrysler decided to develop it in-house. And that led to some problems. There's some interesting parts to it. I'll do more of a deep overview at a later point, but we'll go ahead and do just a slight overview right now as we're looking around here. So let me go ahead and show you it running. And here we are. It runs fantastic. And I just started it up. I'll be cleaning the engine compartment soon. I cleaned it once already. But we had the radiator record, hoses, thermostat cover, belts, obviously, a new alternator. This is actually the original computer and error sensor that came with the car, but not the hydraulic plate. Let me go ahead and shut it off so you can perhaps hear me a little better. I had the catalytic converter, tailpipe, muffler done, so you can hear it's very quiet back here. There's actually nothing special about the catalytic converter and tailpipe. And it's just standard stuff. So let me go ahead and turn it off, and then we'll go ahead and point out the various parts of the system. So we have here the EFI system. Now you have your tank, okay, and originally in the tank there was an in-tank pump and then a separate hole for a sending unit. And what I did is I took a sending unit from an 81 to 83 Cordoba, which is carbureted. Took off all the sending items because they're not compatible with the digital dash here. And we went ahead and installed that. And then we installed an external fuel pump mounted to the frame. The external pump matches the original specifications. Then we replaced all the hoses along the way, as well as the filters at the bottom. The filters have to be a 10 or 11 micron, very low. They're not standard fuel filters. You just can't put anything on here because the injector is very tiny. In a later video, I'll show you the injection unit. They get clogged very, very easily. The fuel goes from the back all the way up to underneath the air cleaner. There's another pump under there and there's a thing called the power module. And the power module basically powers the whole system up here, as well as the pump that's in the air cleaner. There's a fuel meter. There is a injector with very tiny injectors that squirt fuel out. The magic is, of course, using 91 octane gas, using high quality gas, and using the high micron fuel filters. Otherwise, you're going to have very serious problems, which happened a lot to these cars back in the day. And in fact, when we first tried to get this running at the shop, they couldn't get fuel to squirt out of the injectors. And so we followed the guidelines on the Imperial website for cleaning the injectors, and now they squirt perfectly. So the pump up here is basically the pump in the tank just pushes it up to here, and then the pump up here is more of a higher PSI, shoots out a higher pressure up at this point. And initially you'll have just a few of the injectors. Well, I should say the one injector that has the little nozzles on it, you'll just have a few of them shooting out when you're idling, like we were just doing. However, when you need more power, more of them shoot out. And there's a little, there's a fuel regulator and so on and so forth within this air cleaner unit. And there's an automatic shutdown module, which is over here, which is grounded to the body. However, it's advisable to add another wire to ground it to the engine block, which we'll probably end up doing soon. And you'll have, of course, your fuel pump ballast, so on and so forth back there. The system, when it works, is fantastic. It gets great fuel economy for the era for a car of this size and how heavy it is. And it also, it has good pickup and go. Couple problems with it back in the day. Number one, the cheap electronics that Chrysler used in the early ones. Save a couple bucks, cause a lot of problems. This car in today's dollars would be about $70,000 or $80,000. The next problem was, like I said, the first problem was the crummy components. Second problem was issues with the computer and the air cleaner, and the air sensor, and all of them communicating together. And once again, there was a lag, and it had to do with those issues of bad components. The early fuel pumps were not very good, the in-tank fuel pumps as well, and they usually just ate themselves alive. And then of course we have user error. So one thing I've encountered when I've had it worked on this car and my 82 Sinatra is people don't read. It says, attention, engine will not operate with air cover cleaner removed. Keep cover securely tightened and cleaner properly sealed. And you have to have the ring around it, you have to have the nut in the middle, the whole thing. Otherwise this car will not run. Funny thing is, the other day I went back to the shop where they did a great job getting this up and going and replacing everything, getting a nice shape for me. And they had someone else move it, and they couldn't figure out why it wasn't starting. And they kept trying to shoot starter fluid, and it would start for like a second and it would just die. Well, guess what? I looked inside the engine compartment and this was completely loose and the ring was off and the whole thing. For some reason, and I don't know why, but in people's minds, for some reason this car is carbureted. And I really don't understand why they think that when it clearly says fuel injection on the air cleaner. I don't know, but your guess is as good as mine. I got this car for basically free. Put more money in it that's probably worth at this point. But what's really cool about it is it only has 40 some odd thousand miles on it. And it still had the original fuel injection, which really drew me to the car. In the mid 80s, they actually took the fuel injection parts back to Chrysler. They reworked them with mid-80s electronics, which were far better than 1979, 1980. And if you're lucky and you find the parts, they'll say usually reman or remanufactured on the sign, and they'll usually have a newer Chrysler label that has it to where it's from the later 80s. It'll say copyright 1986, 87, 88. And they redid the parts, and those parts are far, far better than the early parts, and their reliability is very good. This one, thankfully, the hydraulic plate, which is underneath the air cleaner, which will be a separate video, has it. And both these have been replaced at some point, not by me, but at some point. And the other thing too that can cause very serious problems is any air leaks, vacuum hoses, so on and so forth. Also internal leaks in the intake manifold. And if you have an internal air leak, you'll never find it. And that's what caused a lot of problems with these. And for some reason, there's like a huge disconnect between people working on these and like understanding that this is fuel injection and following the directions in the manual. Obviously, there's a huge shortage of parts. The parts haven't been made on this since the 80s. And so the fuel injection parts are very hard to find. But sometimes you get lucky and there's, you're able to get some of the parts, and which I've been very lucky to do. And that will be covered in a different video.